today's mindful moment. What if every choice, every fleeting thought you had, every awkward stumble, and every triumphant leap played out again and again for all eternity? Would you live differently at all, knowing your life wasn't just like a single performance, but more like an endless loop? That's kind of the question at the heart of Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
It really challenges how we think about free will and consequence. We tend to view life as this linear thing, like a straight path, a series of choices taking us down a certain route. But what if, like Kundera kind of suggests, the path is circular, destined to repeat forever?
You've brought some really fascinating articles and even some of your own notes about this book. Today we're going deep into The Unbearable Lightness of Being. We're going to explore how Kundera uses this idea of eternal return to grapple with those big questions about being human. Love, betrayal, freedom, the meaning of life itself.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he brings up this myth of eternal return, not as some religious thing, but as a thought experiment, a way to think about how our choices would feel if they weren't bound by time.
So how does this eternal return thing, how does it actually show up for these characters in the book?
Well, just the idea that everything will happen again. It could either make life feel super heavy or completely meaningless.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
On the one hand, if every action has infinite weight, wouldn't we just be frozen by responsibility?
You would think. Right. It's all of a sudden ordering pizza instead of a salad. It's this cosmic dilemma.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, knowing that everything just repeats and there are no ultimate consequences, wouldn't that make you feel I don't know, nothing really matters?
That's exactly where the idea of lightness comes in. Kundera contrasts the potential weight of eternal return with the idea that, if life is fleeting, then everything's pardoned in advance.
So it's we're stuck with this paradox. A life on infinite repeat might feel incredibly significant, even crushingly so. But a life that happens just once might feel weightless, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It has no weight at all.
And Kundera, he doesn't tell us which one is right.
Yeah.
He uses this tension, this question of whether lightness or weight is the positive force. He uses that to kind of explore the lives of his characters. Their relationships almost become a testing ground for this philosophical debate.
And speaking of relationships, one of the most one of the key relationships is between Tomas and Teresa. He's a surgeon who loves his freedom, while she longs for security, for commitment. They're almost like living, breathing examples of lightness and weight.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to think about Tomas's lifestyle, his desire for many relationships through this lens of eternal return. If every fleeting encounter were to play out over and over, would he still make those choices? Right. Would he still find it freeing? Or would the repetition reveal some kind of emptiness there?
And Teresa, how about Teresa? What if all her anxieties, all her insecurities, they just played out, infinitely? Would the weight of them crush her? Or would they, in a strange way, validate her need for something deeper, something more lasting?
Yeah, these are the kinds of questions Kundera seems to be asking us to consider. He uses the characters not just to tell a story, but to explore different ways of existing, of experiencing lightness and weight. He even links this back to Parmenides, the ancient philosopher who posed the question, which is positive, weight or lightness?
Wow. It's there's this parallel between how Kundera sees life and how Parmenides saw the universe. They both saw a fundamental conflict between lightness and weight, being and nothingness.
Absolutely. Parmenides, he believed that true reality, that being, was unchanging and eternal, like this solid, weighty object. And he contrasted that with the world of appearances, which he saw as fleeting and kind of illusory, characterized by change and impermanence, like lightness. And Kundera seems to be doing something similar with his characters. Tomas, with his love for fleeting pleasures and freedom, he could be seen as embodying this lighter, more ephemeral aspect of existence. While Teresa, with her yearning for permanence and meaning, she represents the weight of being.
And then there's Sabina.
Yes.
She adds a whole other layer of complexity to this.
She does.
Sabina's
a fascinating character. She's an artist who views betrayal as a way of breaking free from societal expectations, almost like she's rejecting the weight of those norms. But her freedom, it comes at a cost. There's a sense of isolation, of rootlessness that kind of haunts her.
It's like she embodies this idea that lightness can be both freeing and unsettling at the same
Yeah.
time. It can free you from the weight of expectations, but it can also leave you feeling unmoored, lost in a world without any anchors.
Exactly. And this connects to another really important theme in the novel, the concept of kitsch.
Kitsch. Now, there's a word you don't hear every day.
Right.
I'm really curious to understand what that means and how it fits into this whole discussion about lightness and weight.
Okay, so Kundera, he describes kitsch as the absolute denial of shit.
Okay.
Which might sound a little harsh, but it really captures what he's getting at.
Yeah.
You see, kitsch is all about presenting this sanitized, idealized version of reality, one that completely avoids anything unpleasant or challenging.
So it's like a fake lightness.
Yes.
A way of pretending that like the difficult parts of life, they just don't exist.
Exactly. And Kundera uses this concept to critique totalitarian regimes, which often rely on kitsch to create this false sense of unity and harmony, while they suppress any dissenting voices, any uncomfortable truths.
Oh, I see.
Like, think about propaganda posters, showing these happy, smiling workers or these idealized images of national unity.
Right, right.
That's kitsch in action.
So it's like kitsch creates this illusion of weight, this sense of like solidity and meaning by just denying all the complexity and messiness of real life.
Exactly.
And Sabina, with her embrace of betrayal and her constant questioning of societal norms, she seems to be like a fierce opponent of this whole kitsch thing.
She is.
It's like she wants to face the world in all its rawness, even if it means embracing like the uncomfortable truths that kitsch tries so hard to hide.
And through her art, she challenges the idea that there's one right way of seeing the world. She embraces ambiguity. She juxtaposes these seemingly incongruous images and ideas to disrupt our expectations and make us think critically. She sees the lightness of kitsch as a form of deception, a way of avoiding the true weight of being alive. And this brings us back to that central question, the one Kundera keeps asking, which is positive, weight, or lightness? The novel doesn't really give us like a straightforward answer, but through what the characters go through their choices, we see both lightness and weight can be, well, kind of alluring and dangerous at the same time.
So how does all this like philosophical weightlifting, how does it actually play out in Tomas and Teresa's lives?
Yeah.
Their relationship, it always seems like this back and forth between his need for lightness and her yearning for something more grounded.
Right. It's fascinating how they're totally different views on life, love, even politics. It all shows up in their relationship. Take Tomas, for instance. His wanting multiple lovers, you could see it as a search for lightness, a rejection of the traditional weight, of monogamy, commitment.
It's like he sees those societal expectations as a burden, like they're holding him back from his freedom. But doesn't that kind of lightness, that constant need for new experiences, I don't know, doesn't it eventually lead to a feeling of emptiness?
That is the question, isn't it? Does chasing lightness ultimately leave us feeling unfulfilled? And with Teresa, her longing for security, for something permanent, her fear of betrayal, those are heavy things to carry around.
Yeah, it's as if she sees the weight of commitment, of emotional depth as like a necessary foundation for a meaningful life. But that weight, it also brings a lot of vulnerability and the potential for a lot of pain.
Absolutely.
Her recurring nightmares, they're a powerful image of this, right? They're full of these vivid images of vulnerability, of exposure, this sense of being trapped or overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, that one where she's surrounded by all those naked women, forced to march in formation. What do you think? What do you think those nightmares are telling us about what's going on inside Teresa?
I think those nightmares, they show Teresa's anxieties about her place in the world, her fear of losing her identity, of becoming just another face in the crowd.
Yeah.
And they're often triggered by Tomas's infidelities, which just makes those feelings of insecurity and inadequacy even worse.
It's like she sees those other women as a threat to her very existence, like a symbol of how lightly Tomas views their relationship. It's interesting, though, even though Tomas represents that lightness throughout the book, he still shows compassion for Teresa.
Right.
He gets her pain, even if he doesn't always, act in a way that shows it.
Exactly. And this gets to an important idea that Kundera explores, the difference between compassion as suffering with someone and the Czech concept of sucit, which is more about a shared feeling, an ability to really connect with another person's emotional state.
So it's not just about feeling sorry for someone.
Yeah.
It's about actually being able to see things from their perspective, to feel what they're feeling.
Yes, exactly. And Tomas, even with all his flaws, he seems to have this quality of Susit. He recognizes Teresa's pain, even if his actions sometimes contradict that.
Right.
He understands her weight, even as he embodies a kind of lightness.
But then we have Sabina,
Yeah.
who has a completely different way of approaching this whole idea of lightness. She embraces betrayal as a way to, defy expectations and assert her independence.
Sabina's approach to lightness is almost like radical, It's not just about rejecting norms. It's about actively dismantling them, turning betrayal into a tool for self-expression.
But doesn't that kind of radical lightness doesn't come with a price? Doesn't it lead to a sense of isolation, a loss of connection?
There's this really poignant moment where she's reflecting on all her betrayals, and she wonders what will be left to betray when all the traditional anchors in her life, her family, her country, even love, are gone.
Right.
It suggests that even in this radical lightness, there's still this yearning for something more, something to ground her.
It seems like Kundera he's showing us that both lightness and weight, they can be taken too far.
Yeah.
And that finding some sort of balance between the two is key for a truly meaningful life.
I think that's a great point. And this idea of balance, it's reflected in the last part of the book. When Tomas and Teresa move to the countryside and they find this fragile kind of peace and a simpler life, they create their own little world away from the political turmoil and all the complexities of their past.
It's like they're stepping back from those grand narratives of history, of ideology, and focusing on something more immediate, more grounded. And their dog, Karenin, he becomes a central figure in this new chapter of their lives.
Absolutely. Karenin's presence adds a whole other layer to the story. He represents this pure, unconditional love that goes beyond language, beyond societal constructs. His illness and eventual death, they become this microcosm of the novel's larger themes.
There's that heartbreaking scene where Teresa talks about how in the modern world, cows have become nameless, just machinae animae, soulless machines. It's this powerful statement about losing individuality, about the dehumanizing effects of a society that values efficiency over empathy.
Yeah, that scene really highlights Teresa's deep compassion, her ability to see the soul, even in the most overlooked creatures. And this compassion, it extends to Karenin, whose illness becomes this reminder of how fragile life is, how inevitable loss is.
And even in her grief, Teresa manages to transform suffering into something that's both absurd and beautiful. Remember her dream? The one where Karenin gives birth to 2 rolls and a bee.
Oh,
it's so strange.
That dream image, it captures this strange beauty that's so central to the unbearable lightness of being. It's a reminder that even when faced with death, there can be humor, tenderness, and even a kind of transcendent lightness. It suggests that the weight of sorrow, it doesn't have to crush us. It can coexist with moments of grace and absurdity.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to the idea of chance, of coincidence, which plays such a big role in the novel. Tomas and Teresa's paths cross through this series of improbable events, as if fate, or maybe just random chance, brought them together.
Yeah, it's like Kundera's flipping the script on us.
Yeah.
And how we usually think about cause and effect. It's like he's suggesting those things we just brush off as accidents or coincidences. Maybe they're the real driving forces in our life.
Exactly. He even asks, but is not an event, in fact, more significant and noteworthy the greater the number of fortuities necessary to bring it about? It's like this really bold idea that maybe those chance encounters, those unexpected twists and turns, they're what really shape our destinies.
And that whole idea of disrupting expectations, it's so central to Sabina's character, right?
Yeah.
It's not enough for her to just reject those societal norms. She has to actively betray them, to constantly be looking for those new experiences that challenge her own understanding of the world.
Right. Sabina's life, it becomes this series of calculated betrayals, each one a way of asserting her own individuality, defying the weight of convention. Her relationship with Franz, he's drawn to her mysterious past, her longing for authenticity. I think their relationship's a perfect example of this.
Yeah. Franz, he represents this kind of idealism, right? This yearning for a life that's more real, more meaningful than the academic world that he's stuck in. He sees Sabina as his escape from the unreal.
He's so desperate for a connection to something that feels more tangible, more authentic. And he thinks he's found that in Sabina. But Sabina with her history of betrayals, her deep-seated distrust of grand narratives, she's ultimately an enigma to him.
It's like they're speaking different languages.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
Right.
Franz is drawn to the logical meaning of her words, while she's more focused on the semantic thesaurus of the river flowing through them.
That phrase, semantic thesaurus, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to describe all those underlying currents of meaning that run beneath the surface of language. Sabine is attuned to those currents, while Franz is still trying to just decode the words themselves.
And their relationship, it falls apart under the weight of their miscommunication.
Yeah.
And Sabina moves on, right?
Yeah.
She goes off seeking those new experiences, new betrayals, always pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable.
And this brings us back to that central question of lightness versus weight. Franz, in his pursuit of a more real life, he ends up burdened by the weight of his own idealism. He's crushed by this realization that even the political and social movements that he once believed in, they're ultimately flawed, compromised.
Yeah. He experiences this profound disillusionment at the Cambodian border. As he watches the Grand March, this thing that he once admired devolve into this chaotic and absurd spectacle.
It's like that moment, it just captures how fragile our beliefs are, the way our ideals can just crumble when they come up against reality. Franz has to confront the limitations of his own worldview to accept that the Grand March of history, it's not always this triumphant parade.
So if even our most deeply held beliefs can betray us, where do we find meaning? Does Kundera offer us any answers to that?
He doesn't really give us any easy answers.
Yeah.
But he does suggest that meaning can be found in the small moments, those quiet moments,
right,
in the connections we make with others, and in the beauty we find in the world, even in the midst of suffering.
Like Tomas and Teresa finding some kind of peace in their rural life with Karenin.
Exactly.
It's a simpler life, but it gives them a chance to create their own meaning, their own sense of purpose, away from all those grand narratives that have failed them.
Yes, exactly. They find comfort in those everyday routines of life, in those shared routines and that unspoken understanding that grows between them. And in Karenin, they find a source of unconditional love and loyalty, a reminder of the beauty that can exist even in a world that often feels absurd and meaningless.
Yeah. His death, it's heartbreaking, but it's also this testament to the power of those small, fleeting moments of connection that make life worth living.
And Teresa's dream of Karenin giving birth to two roles and a bee, that image, it just encapsulates that unique blend of tragedy and humor, lightness and weight that you find throughout the whole novel.
Yeah, it's such a weird image.
It suggests that even in death, there can be beauty, absurdity, and that life with all its complexities, it's something to be cherished, not just endured.
Kundera definitely leaves us with a lot to think about.
Right, he does.
He makes us question our ideas about meaning and purpose, about the nature of love and betrayal, and about how we choose to navigate this strange, often confusing journey we call life.
He doesn't give us easy answers, but he gives us the tools to ask better questions, to dig deeper into the human experience, and to appreciate that paradoxical beauty of a world that's both light and heavy, both meaningful and absurd.
The Unbearable Lightness of Being is one of those books that really stays with you,
It does.
Long after you finished reading it, it's a book that encourages us to embrace those big existential questions, to confront the complexities of our own lives, and to find meaning not just in the grand schemes of things, but in those small, fleeting moments that make up the tapestry of being human.
If you're ready to face these ideas head on, to challenge your own assumptions, and to really dive deep into what it means to be human, I highly recommend picking up The Unbearable Lightness of Being and giving it a read. You can find a link to purchase a copy in the show notes.
And definitely share your thoughts with us. Let us know what parts resonated with you, what challenged you, what insights you took away from Kundera's masterpiece. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with another exploration of, thought-provoking ideas and compelling narratives.
Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep embracing the unbearable lightness of being.
And for more mind-blowing content, don't forget to check out Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.
Yeah, you can find a link in the show notes.
Mindful Moments is full of bite-sized episodes like mini deep dives into science, philosophy, history, and art.
It's perfect for keeping your mind active while on the go.
And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next adventure in knowledge. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.